You're sitting in a Geneva hotel suite, drinking a $400 glass of scotch, watching a news ticker scroll the death toll from a war you personally armed, both sides. And the number climbing on that screen is the closest thing you have left to a performance review. You are Major General Conrad Voss, 43 years old, decorated, retired on paper, active in ways that will eventually be read into a federal indictment. And here's the part nobody tells you. You didn't get here because you were evil. You got here because you were useful. And useful people, inside broken systems, get used until there's nothing left. The United States government pays defense contractors $180 billion a year to build the tools of war. The contractors pay generals like you $300,000 consulting retainers to tell them which tools the government will want next. You sit at the hinge between those two worlds. Your job is to make sure nobody looks directly at the hinge. Your pension is solid. Your record is clean. But clean doesn't cover your mother's assisted living. Doesn't cover the legal bills from the separation. Doesn't cover the specific financial humiliation of a man who gave 22 years to a country that rewards its generals with handshakes and a folded flag. Your first week inside the arrangement, you meet your handler. His name is Devereaux. Civilian. Defense consultant. A man who wears American flag pins on Swiss suits and refers to active war zones as emerging markets. He runs a procurement network supplying 6 armed factions across 3 continents, including factions on opposing sides of the same conflict. He explains this without embarrassment. Because in his world, there is no contradiction. Hardware doesn't have a flag. It has a customer. You find it disgusting. You say so. He hands you a folder. The folder contains the procurement history of your last command, the vehicles your soldiers drove, the body armor worn by 4 men who survived blasts that should have killed them. Every item traces to manufacturers whose largest international clients include governments you were opposing in theater. You sit with that for a long time. Devereaux lets you sit. Then he says, "You're not disgusted by the system, General. You're disgusted you weren't briefed sooner." He's right. That's the part that breaks something in you. He is completely right. Your partner in the arrangement is a man named Garrett, former DA, 15 years running intelligence assets in conflict zones. He keeps a photo on his laptop, his daughter in a track uniform, mid-sprint, leaning into a finish line she's clearly about to cross. Garrett talks about that kid the way some men talk about faith, like she's the only equation in his life that still balances. First week, Garrett walks you through the network, shows you the supply routes, the shell companies, the timing structures. He shakes his head at one arrangement and says, "We tell ourselves we're stability consultants. That's the story. I keep waiting for it to feel true." You like Garrett immediately. He's the kind of man who still needs this to mean something. 2 weeks in, he pulls up a video, his daughter crossing the finish line, arms up, face shocked by her own body. Garrett is grinning so wide he has to look away from the screen. You watch him and think, this is someone I want in my corner. Then Devereaux calls. He tells you the Eastern faction you've been supplying is advancing faster than projected. If they achieve a decisive victory, the conflict ends. A conflict that ends is a contract that ends. Your job is to resupply the losing side. Restore the balance. He says it like he's asking you to rebalance a portfolio. You ask what happens to the people caught in the middle when both sides get resupplied simultaneously. He pauses, then says, "That's why we hired someone with your strategic experience. To minimize unnecessary friction. You should refuse. You should call someone. But you think about your mother's facility. You think about the bills. You think about how the government built this system and Devereaux just formalized it. So you approve the resupply package. You start making adjustments. Small ones at first. You use your Pentagon relationships to monitor procurement requests from both factions, timing your network supplies to keep the conflict at productive attrition rather than resolution. You're not manufacturing the violence. You're just making sure it sustains itself. That distinction feels important. You keep making it. Garrett notices. Of course he does. He spent 15 years reading intelligence patterns. He pulls you aside after a resupply decision that shifts the front line and costs 40 soldiers their lives. He says, "You knew that timing was going to move the balance. You did it anyway." You tell him it was a strategic calculation. He says strategic calculations have names. You tell him to drop it. He does. But he looks at you different after that. 3 months in, Devereaux restructures the payment model. The network now receives a percentage tied to conflict duration. You are being compensated directly for the war lasting longer. You sign the agreement. A week later, a journalist publishes a piece on civilian casualty rates in the Eastern Province. The numbers are catastrophic. Garrett files an internal memo raising network exposure concerns. You intercept it. You bury it in a compliance folder no one reads. Garrett finds out. He stands in the doorway and looks at you. Doesn't raise his voice. Says, "My daughter asked what I do for work. I told her I keep people safe." Then he walks out. That sentence lives in your head for months. You can't get rid of it. You start drinking before noon on days you have to review the casualty mapping reports. 6 months in, the money hits differently. Devereaux introduces performance bonuses, conflict duration premiums, equity in 2 of the shell companies. You are suddenly clearing $1.4 million a year to manage a war you can watch on a news ticker from a leather chair. Your mother's facility is covered for life. You settle the legal fees. You buy a watch that costs more than your first car. Your ex-wife asks how the consulting is going. You tell her it's complex work. She doesn't push. Nobody wants to look closely at a miracle. Here is what nobody tells you about running weapons to both sides of a conflict. It doesn't feel like treason. It feels like expertise. Every decision has a strategic rationale. Every death has a geopolitical context. Every moral collapse has a memo attached, signed by someone with more stars than you used to have. You're not breaking the law. You're operating in the architecture of it. And that's worse. Because there's no crime scene. No moment of rupture. Just a slow professional erosion of everything you swore you were at 19. Then a convoy gets hit. Eastern Province. 7 American contractors. 2 serving military advisors. The after-action intelligence reaches your network through a DIA contact. The ambush was coordinated using communications equipment your network supplied to the Western faction 6 weeks earlier. The timing was enabled by your resupply operation. You read the names in the report. You close the laptop. You sit in the Geneva hotel room and watch the lights on the lake until morning, and you do not pick up the phone. That is the moment. Not the first deal. Not the money. The moment you hold the full weight of what you've done, and you choose the window over the call. Everything after that is just repetition. Garrett reaches his limit 3 months later. He comes into the suite and sets his credentials on the table. Says he's done. That he'd rather drive a truck than run another resupply operation that's going to show up in a UN human rights report. You look at Garrett. You think about what happens if he walks out. You think about Devereaux. You think about your mother. And you do something you will not forgive yourself for. You tell Garrett that if he resigns and makes noise, you'll flag his intelligence file. Note that he approved the communications package that equipped the ambush unit. That the contractor deaths trace to his authorization. It's constructed from half-truths, but it would follow him into every security clearance application for the rest of his life. His career ended. His daughter's future altered. Garrett stares at you. Something behind his eyes goes very still and very cold. The way things go cold when a person finishes grieving something and accepts it. He picks up his credentials. He walks back to his desk. He doesn't say a word. That silence is louder than anything anyone has ever said to you. Garrett stays. But he's different now. The photo of his daughter disappears from his laptop. He stops mentioning the track meets. He stops mentioning her at all. You showed the last man in the room who still needed this to mean something exactly what it means. And you used the thing he loved most to do it. 2 years pass. Devereaux expands. He wants you managing 8 active conflict zones. Standardizing the supply timing methodology. Training new network managers. Your cut increases again. An apartment in Zurich. Stock options. You should feel something. Instead, you carry the same hollowness you've had since the morning you watched Garrett take that photo off his laptop. You write the methodology. It's precise. Calibrate resupply intervals to prevent decisive outcomes. Maintain factional balance at sustainable attrition rates. Prioritize equipment categories with high replacement frequency. You call it the equilibrium framework. It sounds like conflict resolution theory. It is a manual for keeping people killing each other at the most commercially optimal pace. 3 years in, the network manages 11 active arrangements. Your methodology is being replicated across Devereaux's entire operation. The manufacturers love you. The shell company equity has tripled. Nobody mentions the UN report documenting systematic targeting of civilian infrastructure using equipment from your network's manufacturers. Nobody mentions the mortality projections showing your equilibrium framework extended the Eastern conflict by 31 months. That's not a complication. That's the business model. Your son is 17. He wants to apply to West Point. He asked you to write his nomination letter. He wants to serve. He says it the way you said it at 19, with the specific, unguarded conviction of someone whose beliefs have never been tested. You write the letter. You write it well. You put everything true about him into it. His discipline, his integrity, his genuine desire to be something larger than himself. You write it and you think. You are sending him into the machine that made you. And you let him go anyway. Then the investigation starts. A joint task force. Treasury, DOJ, 2 European intelligence services. A prosecutor named Castillo who has been building a financial crimes case on Devereaux's network for 18 months. Your name is in the intercepts. Devereaux's legal team arrives in Zurich within 48 hours. They hand you a separation agreement. $3 million. A complete NDA. In exchange, the network's operational decisions get attributed to mid-level logistics managers. People like Garrett. It's in paragraph 9. Network-level strategic decisions will be attributed to operational personnel per the organization's distributed management structure. They're going to finish destroying Garrett with your signature. You read paragraph 9. You read it again. $3 million. Your name disappears. Garrett absorbs everything. It's the easiest path. It's always the easiest path. Instead, you call Castillo's office. You give her everything. Bank records. Supply manifests. The equilibrium framework. Devereaux's directives. The shell company structures. Every operation you can reconstruct. You talk for 11 hours. When you're done, she asks why you're doing this. You tell her about Garrett. About the photo. About the threat. She writes it down without reaction. The way people write things down when they've already heard worse. The story breaks across 3 outlets simultaneously. 2 manufacturer holding companies suspend trading. Devereaux is detained in Frankfurt. The network's shell structure unravels in days because you gave them the architecture. 6 congressional offices announce inquiries. And you face 9 federal counts. Arms trafficking, conspiracy, fraud, material support, obstruction. The trial runs 5 months. Your lawyers are expensive and very good. They argue systemic capture, institutional momentum, documented complicity at the cabinet level. The prosecution agrees those actors are culpable, being prosecuted separately, which does not reduce yours. Castillo stands before the jury in closing and says, the defendant wants you to believe he was a mechanism in a larger apparatus. And he was. But a general who designs the apparatus, optimizes the apparatus, and profits from the apparatus while soldiers and civilians die inside it does not get to use the apparatus as his defense. He turned it on every morning. He could have turned it off. The jury is out for 8 hours. Then Garrett testifies. He sits in the witness box in a dark suit that fits like he bought it specifically for this day. He describes the intercepts, the timing operations, the threat. His voice doesn't break. His delivery is completely flat, the flatness of a man who processed every word before he said it. The prosecutor asks if he considers you a criminal. Garrett looks at you, directly at you, for the first time in 2 years. And he says, he was the best strategic mind I've worked with in 30 years. He understood systems better than anyone I've known. And then he became one. I don't know if that makes him a criminal. The jury can decide that. I just know that his daughter asked him what he does. And he had no answer left. He means his own daughter. Of course he does. But the sentence lands like he's talking about yours. Because in every way that matters, he is. 14 years. Reduced to 9 on the cooperation agreement. 9 years. Your son defers West Point. He sends 1 letter. 2 pages. No yelling, no grief. Just a precise moral accounting of exactly what you cost him, and exactly how long he thinks it will take him to sit in a room where your name comes up without feeling it in his chest. He says he'll write again when he can do it without lying about how he's doing. That letter takes 14 months to arrive. They process you at a federal facility in Virginia. The intake officer is 24 and does not know your name. To her, you are a case number, a photograph, a bunk assignment. You have approved security protocols and facilities exactly like this one. You know the entire architecture of what's happening. That knowledge provides no insulation from it whatsoever. The gate's close behind the transport. It's just a sound. You've heard its equivalent in 30 countries. It's different when it's for you. Somewhere, Devereaux is in a different facility running his own arithmetic. Somewhere, the manufacturers are replacing their boards, releasing statements, watching their stock prices recover, because they always do. Somewhere, Castillo is building the cabinet-level cases that will take 3 more years and feel, to the people who lived inside the damage, like a formality. Somewhere in the Eastern Province, the conflict is finally de-escalating now that the supply timing network has collapsed. Nobody will write a story connecting those 31 extra months to your name. The people who died inside them don't have a number attached to you. They're just background. Somewhere, your son is at a university now, studying something that isn't war. Somewhere, your mother is in her facility, paid through the end of her life, completely unaware, which is the one mercy in the entire architecture of your choices. And somewhere, Garrett is driving home. His daughter crossed another finish line last weekend. He watched it in person. He didn't have to tell himself a story about what it meant. The photo is back on his laptop. 9 years. 3,285 days. You spent your career calculating how long a conflict could be sustained before it collapsed. You ran that model on a dozen wars. You called it the equilibrium framework. You were very precise. You just never ran it on yourself. The people who operate systems always assume they're the ones doing the calculating. They never see the moment they stop being the analyst and become the variable. The overhead light clicks off at 10. Institutional. Precise. Somewhere, your son is at a desk. Somewhere, Garrett is home. And somewhere in the Eastern Province, people who never knew your name are beginning, slowly, to bury their dead in something that is starting to look like quiet. That quiet cost 31 months. Your methodology built the clock. The arithmetic doesn't soften with distance. It sharpens.